Good evening, everyone. I know that many of you have been teaching all day, and it's a really wonderful opportunity for grown-up conversation. So I'm so sorry to have disrupted that, but we are so thrilled that you're here. My name's GAIL Thomas-Strong. I'm with WFYI Public Media, and I work with community engagement and education there. And we are so thrilled to welcome you tonight to what is our 29th conversation about education here at Central Library. Tonight's conversation about education is a partnership between the library, Teach Plus, and WFYI's American Graduate Initiative. And we'd also like to give a thanks to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting for a grant that is allowing us to do this evening. These conversations, we've been doing them for almost 5 years now. And part of what we like about them is that it allows us a chance to do three things. It allows us a chance to deepen awareness about issues that affect children and youth and their success. It allows us to deepen people's understanding of that. Rarely are these single source challenges that children bring to us. They're pretty complicated. And keeping them on a path to graduation can get pretty tricky. We also like it because it gives us a chance to share with you ways that you can take action and help us begin to really look at solutions. What's especially exciting, I think, about tonight's event is that we're actually going to host a follow-up. That's May 12th. It will be at WFYI, and if you picked up a flyer, you should have information about that. But that will be an opportunity for us to be able to dive into this topic of ACEs even more deeply. We hope that tonight is the beginning of a conversation among teachers and administrators, youth workers, those of us whose life touches children in some way. As you watch the film tonight, it's kind of a two-part evening. We'll have a film and then we'll have a conversation. We're going to encourage you to silence your cell phones, but you just have as much fun as you want to tweeting. That's just great. And we're using the hashtag, and I need to get it right, hashtag IndiePaperTigers, so you can certainly engage in that conversation online. You also may have received a note card as you came in, and one of the reasons we're excited about that is that your questions will help us shape content for the event that we're doing on May 12th. So we're thrilled if you have one of these. So some of you here tonight work in schools every day, some work in youth agencies, some work in libraries and other settings. Some of you work with young children, some of you work with older children. It doesn't matter. The anger, the frustration, the disappointment, the disconnectedness that children arrive on our doorsteps with every day matters. It's real for them. What's cute in a 2-year-old, and you think maybe you can just wrap your arms around that little 2-year-old and this temper tantrum will go away. That's sort of one end of the spectrum. The other is the high school student that's bigger than you, who's angry and needs to figure out what to do with that anger. And there's everything in between, and you know how complicated the lives are for these children. So as you watch tonight, we encourage you to listen to your heart, and we encourage you to use your head, because the solution is going to involve both. Somehow we have to bring all of our capacities to bear to really work with these kids in an effective way. Think about your own environment. Think about solutions that you can begin to implement there. I want to just give a shout out at this moment to Dr. Carlotta Cooprider. Carlotta, just wave. We'll catch Carlotta later. She will be moderating our panel tonight. After that, Carlotta is the director of instructional practice for Teach Plus. And I just want to mention the names of others who will be on our panel. They will include Ahmed Young, Miriam Acevedo, Cindy Jackson, and Clete Ladd. And Carlotta, when she gets up to speak after the film, will offer a little more introduction about both of them. So at this moment, I would invite you to sit back, relax, tweet your hearts out, and just enjoy what I think will be a very compelling film for you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Carlotta Cooprider, and I have the privilege of working with Teach Plus and working with teachers in Indianapolis every day that want to impact policy or practice, and so it's such a privilege to be here with you this evening. It's interesting, I got this in my email. You know, when you're cleaning out your email last fall, I was cleaning out my email and I got this email from Paper Tigers. I was like, what is this? And I almost deleted it. And then I opened it, and then I watched it, and then from there, it's like I just knew that this city had to start talking about toxic stress at a level that maybe we're not talking about right now. So that's what's going to happen tonight, right? The goal of this time together was really two parts. The first part was just increase awareness around toxic stress, and that's what we're doing tonight by showing the film. And at the information table, there's also other screenings that you can see the film, and also encourage some of your colleagues to see it as well. And then the second part, right, is not just, we have the what, right? We know that there's toxic stress, and now it's the so what. So what are we gonna do next, right? What are our next steps? And so that's kind of where we're gonna start tonight. We have some special guests with us from the community, and we are going to go ahead and start talking about it up here, and we encourage you to start talking about it with us through a couple different actions. I think you got some note cards when you checked in, so we would encourage you to write your questions on those note cards, and those will be foundational questions that we will use for our second action part on May 12th. So we'd be bringing together, hopefully a lot of you and even more community members to talk about so what and now what. What are we gonna do with this information, and what actions are we gonna take? So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and have the panelists introduce themselves, and kind of the format here is, we know that you've all had a long day, so we're just gonna be here about 30 minutes longer. And the panelists are going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to use the discussion guide. We're going to have our conversation up here really stem around 4 key discussions from the actual discussion guide, and we'll get a chance to hear what our community members have to say about this. I can't help but thinking of, in the very beginning, the picture of the brain, you know, when they were showing the brain and the difference in how stress impacts it. And just imagine as educators if we saw students like that. What would happen if we could see the brain instead of the fact that they're not having their uniform on, or their, you know, their attendance statistics, or their report card? You know, how would that impact us? So that's a question I'm personally starting to think about, and so I encourage you to identify your own questions. So let's go ahead and have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we will move on with the actual questions.
Good evening. I'm Cindy Jackson. I work with Indianapolis Public Schools, and I'm the District Positive Discipline Coordinator.
Good evening. My name's Clete. I work with Kendesi Academy, and I've been with in the education for about 30 years.
Good evening. I'm Miriam Acevedo Davis, and I'm the President and CEO of La Plaza, and we serve the Hispanic community here in Central Indiana.
How's everyone? My name is Ahmed with the Indianapolis Mayor's Office of Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools. Excited to have this conversation.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and go with the first question. And just so we are having a high-function, high-impact conversation, and we're using our time the most efficiently, the format we're going to use is I'm going to ask a question. And Cindy, we would like you to respond to the first question first. And then our other panelists can join in. And if you just kind of maybe raise your hand if you're going to join in, and that will help the camera crew know when to turn your mic on and off. Make sense?
Thank you.
All right, sounds good. So Cindy, as you watched the film, what stood out to you?
What stood out to me was students that I've worked with for all my time in education, and that the power of our students to be resilient. I've been an urban educator my entire life, and find that the students, when I believe students are resilient, they go farther. It also stood out to me the power of relationship. That relationship is an essential part of instruction and of teaching, and of being able to help children grow. I think what I also felt across the way was a belief system that if we as educators have hope in our hearts and use every opportunity as an opportunity for instruction and care, that we can be successful no matter what. Those were hard. Those kids have had some hard times, and they reminded me of children that I've worked with in IPS and have worked in other communities. And so when we forget that their behavior is just the tip of the iceberg, then I think we are not putting ourselves in a situation to be successful, nor are they. So sometimes I think we find ourselves looking at the outside and not forgetting that inside is what we really need to talk about. And we need to think about the whys and understanding. And yeah, so I only had 2 minutes, so we better stop because to go on. But I think that those are the things, they all merge together when I think about what our role is with children and how important it is for us to remember that deep inside is where we have to touch to make a difference.
I think on your second point, you mentioned relationships. And during one of the opening scenes in the classroom with Gordon, he said, I'm going to drop something really heavy on you guys. And then he dropped it, and then the entire class was silent. And then he said, I love you, you know. And that was one of the opening scenes with Gordon. And one of the final scenes at the end of the documentary with Gordon, he ended it by saying, I love you. And throughout the entire documentary, that was one of the underlying themes for me, was the expression of love. And in order to truly express love, you have to express a certain level of vulnerability. And as teachers, it's difficult sometimes, and as educators in general, to make yourself vulnerable. But to really connect with kids, particularly kids that have experienced extreme stress, you have to make yourself vulnerable to connect with them. And that unconditional love, even through text and in person, it's extremely ingratiating. It brings a child in and then being able to develop that relationship to allow that child to feel comfortable to say, you know what, I love you too. You know, and I saw that throughout the film, and that's powerful.
And even the times when they couldn't say, I love you, just by an eye, sometimes, yeah, sometimes our children don't have the words that they need to say. Yeah.
You know, and I'm really big on building relationships with students and with people. And I saw myself, I saw students that I've worked with in this film. And one of the things that, you know, I'm kind of an old school basketball player, and I remember John Wooden said, kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's kind of been my teaching philosophy. I saw a young man that reminded me of, we had a young student at our school who actually saved the life of a deputy sheriff a few years ago and was celebrated all the way to the United States Justice Department. 2 weeks after he received all this acclaim, scholarships, and everything like that, his mom moved to California. He was 16 years old. She left him. And that kid's behavior became really horrible. And I asked him one day, I said, you know, why don't you let me take you home? He said, yeah, take me home. I need for you to take me home. So we get in my car and we drive 2 blocks. He lived 2 blocks from the school. And I went inside, there was no food, no lights, no furniture. And the student had a tough time dealing with the women teachers. And a lot of the women wanted, the teachers wanted him kicked out of school, not knowing that when he saw a female teacher, he saw his mom. He saw being abandoned, someone who didn't care about him. Proud to say that young man graduated. He utilized his scholarship. But like I said, we really have to take time to build that relationship with students and know who they are as well as whose they are.
Pass.
Thank you. And I just want to add to this because I'm a champion for teachers. That's my passion work. That's what I like, to work with teachers and help them to grow and develop to be who they want to be and to impact kids. So I'm just going to ask a follow-up question to that. So I'm hearing a lot of what our teachers need to do, and I see them do it every day. I see our teachers doing the things that I'm seeing in the film, and so I'm just curious, what are your thoughts around the toxic stress for them? And how do we address that? And I know it's not on here, but I know we have a lot of teachers out there. And so I'd just like to take a couple of minutes to, if anybody would like to respond to that.
I would really love to respond to that. I just had a conversation about an hour and a half ago with a group of teachers like that. They call it secondary stress in the literature. And there's the primary stress that the child, but those of us who deal with and work with the children every day and work in the environments every day have to find the tools to take care of ourselves and to process what we see and feel. If we do not, we can't work at our best. I used to bake bread a lot. I do things in the garden. I do things that I can see results right away, because guess what? When we teach, do we see results? We don't. So you've got to build closure into what we do. And the other thing is, I've learned through my study of brain, is the brain likes things to finish. We like completion. And if we don't ever have completion, we're going to create our own anxieties. So I think it's really important as we think about how we're working with our kids that we find support groups, or you find ways, or you don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm overwhelmed. And it's not I'm a poor teacher, I care deeply, but I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how to neutralize the situation. And I think that's a word that I've been discovering lately about what it means. And I'm pretty passionate about this, as you can probably tell. But I think it's important because in training teachers, we forgot that part. We forget that part, that we've got to remember to make sure we're ready to do the job that we're so honored to do, to teach.
I think the most effective therapists are those therapists that actually see other therapists to help them channel their feelings, their emotions, and unload and unpack. So what are we doing to support our educators to unload and unpack and to dishevel all that stuff that's piled on? So hopefully we're able to support through some of the mental health wellness and some of the wellness programs that are around the city. It's pretty essential.
Well, in the film, they talked about all the support for the kids, you're right. And then when we were talking, we were saying, what's the parallel track for teachers and their development and their support? So as we look at the film and see all the support for the kids, where's the support, where the program, so to speak, that parallel track for them, so, yeah.
You know, and we, as teachers, and I'm sure every educator here, has taken on some responsibility for helping students enjoy the experience. And I know if you have a spouse or a significant other, you go home and you tell that person every day, your day, you know. And I think it's really good, but one of the things that we've talked about over the years is that bringing the teachers together to talk and to share, and you know, because there are experiences that I didn't have that other teachers have had, and it gives me an opportunity to say, hey, you know, maybe I may try that. You know, one of my ways of distress and this, you know, relieving stress at the end of the day may sound a little weird to some people. But I learned this in some martial arts training that I had years ago, that when you frown, you know, the muscles and the stress, you know, tenses your muscles up. But if you put your face in water, you can actually hear the hum. It's like a drone of an engine when your face is in the water and you're stressed. But when you de-stress, or if you frown and tense your face up really tightly, then you feel it even more, you hear it. But as you decrease it and loosen it up, then the hum comes down to a nice little mellow tone. So I've practiced that to de-stress at the end of the day. And one day with some teachers, we were at the Excel Center, and we had these pots of water. And I had some teachers actually say, hey, you know, well, I'm not doing this. Well, a couple of us did it. You know, they did it with me. And so some students walked by and said, why do the teachers have their heads? But it was our way of distressing them. But we shared with the students that we care about them. And we really try not to own that and add to our stress. But because we love what we do and we love who we work with, we do kind of own it as well.
Yeah, and so that'll be the next documentary. I know we talk about secondary stress, compassion, fatigue, different things, but I thought it was important to bring it up, especially since we have so many educators in our audience, and we're coming off of a month of I-STEP testing and different things like that, that we might all need some water to put our faces in. So, all right, let's keep going. All right, Miriam, if you would like to be the first to respond to this one, what was one thing that surprised you the most in the documentary?
Yeah, listening to Gordon, the teacher, talk about the most difficult part being accepting that behaviors were out of the student's control. So I thought that was interesting, probably because I hadn't thought about it. But that was realizing that or accepting that also made it possible to be compassionate and to be unconditional toward them. So really the behaviors were out of their control. That surprised me probably because I hadn't thought about it. And as someone in mental health, we always assume the kids are in control, that you make choices. So that was a bit of a surprise.
I should not have been surprised by the language. But, you know, when you're, you know, words don't always express how you really feel, your emotion. But I also know that teachers have to find ways to reach the children and speak to them in language and terms that they understand, you know, they can comprehend, and kind of say, you get me, you feel me, as they say. And so when the teacher's like, yeah, you know, he had a effed up day, you know, and I'm thinking like, wow, man, that would never have happened, you know, in our school. But I think that helps the teachers identify with the students, and the students identify that the teachers identify with them.
There was a great example of that identification between the female teacher that was at the serving as a parole officer or correction officer, and she had a shared experience because she had been sexually molested or abused as a child, and then being able to identify with the other young ladies, and in some instances the young boys as well, that experienced that kind of trauma. You know, so being able to connect with your students on that human level and have those shared experiences. And a word I think we don't truly understand is empathy. And being able to channel that level of empathy to truly put yourself into the place of that child and truly see through their lens what they're experiencing, the pain that they're harnessing, because they don't know how to articulate it. They don't know how to focus that energy on something constructive and positive. And being able to connect with them in that way is really meaningful. And what was most surprising was the amount of sexual abuse that was talked about. I think one of the last figures that I heard was 1 in 3 of the students in the school had experienced some level of sexual abuse. And it's pretty scary, especially as a father of 2 girls. Yeah.
That wasn't so very surprising to me, because at a school that Dr. Cooprider and I worked at, the students used to write their autobiographies. And we would read their autobiographies. And even then, I mean, between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4, girls as well as young boys had experienced some sort of sexual molestation.
So we have about 10 minutes remaining, so let's start to move to what we can do. So on question 3, Clete, maybe you can be the first one to respond, and then we'll have other folks join in. How did learning about the adverse childhood experience efforts made at Lincoln impact how you think about your work, and specifically, what does it mean to our city?
Excellent. I am very much opposed to expelling students and suspending students. We've had experiences where we expelled students from school and they went out and robbed and burglarized while they were off. You know, that's what they wanted to do, you know. But I hope that we think of alternative ways of helping the students deal with these stressful situations, keep them in school, keep them on the path to learning, you know, and let them feel accepted. I'm sure all of us have worked with students who would rather stay at school than go home. You know, home is a terrible place. And we had a student that we found had been sleeping in the school for a couple of days. You know, he had food, he had a restroom and all that, but home is such a horrible place that he'd rather stay at school.
Anybody want to add to that?
I'd like to add to that in thinking about the importance of this, and I think it's something that since No Child Left Behind, we paid so much attention to the artificial test score, and that we have not paid attention to the learner and their life and the whole child. And I think that this kind of an awareness perhaps can help us find balance in what we have to do in the schools and justify that it is okay every day to have time relationships, that we have to teach curriculum about problem solving and self-esteem. We have to pay attention to the social learning of our children, because as they said with many of those children, this is what you need for life, right? You need the skills that allow you to relate to others, to express your feelings safely. You need to know how, if you're not feeling safe, to let somebody know you're not feeling safe. It's one of our jobs in all of our schools to work on making sure children are physically and emotionally safe. And having conversations about emotional safety is very important, because I think when you think about that work, it's like, well, we do that in our schools. Should we do it at our community centers? Should we do it on our buses? I think that's, to me, the community conversation that could have. Are we helping our children feel emotionally and physically safe in our communities? So this is a good starter for that.
And another component or corollary to that community conversation, I think, is thinking about what is the end of education. Neil Postman wrote a book called The End of Education. I think it came out like in 1996, and it was asking, okay, is this the end of public education on one end? And then the other big picture question was, what is the ultimate outcome? What do we want to get out of this education system? And those are the questions we need to be asking. Are we just trying to create robots? Are we still living in the agrarian age where we're just trying to churn out these students and then push them back out? What is the ultimate purpose of this education that we're supposedly providing to our students? And that's a conversation that I think many of you are having, whether it's with the fellows or other experiences. And I think we should continue to push those limits during those conversations.
I think it's also how incredibly difficult the work is for teachers. I think if you're looking at this kind of trauma and stress and what students bring to the classroom, how extremely difficult, and all the challenges and complexity. And do we as a society certainly respect teachers enough, honor teachers enough, and provide the support and certainly higher salaries that they deserve for doing the incredible work? So it certainly brought that to the fore. So
I'd like to add real quickly.
You have 30 seconds, Clete, because I worked with you before, and I know.
Okay. But Kelsey talked about how drugs had continually taken people away from her. And I don't think we do enough in our community to educate people about drugs, because we've done more to glamorize it, than we have to actually educate people as to the harm that it can do, and that it continues to do to our community. We have now third, fourth generation crack, meth addicts.
They talked about that a little bit in the film as well. We have about 5 minutes remaining, so let's go ahead and move on to question number 4, and you can go ahead and lead off on this one, Ahmed. What do you think our community, so we know all of us are playing different roles in the community, what do you think our community can do to play a role in reducing adverse childhood experiences and supporting healthy child and family development?
Service. When I was growing up, on our birthdays, my mother would encourage us to, instead of celebrate our own birthday and celebrate self, go knock on Miss Pearsall's door down the street and say, what can I do for you, And my mother, knowing her sons, would talk to Miss Pearsall beforehand and say, Miss Pearsall, can you make sure that there's something for Ahmed to do? Take out the trash, cut the grass, something, So service, volunteer, mentor, and what I would love to emphasize is mentoring in a truly robust way, not the one-off corporate, I'm here for this one time and I'm going back to the 27th floor, but truly developing, like you said, a relationship with the child, understanding their triggers, understanding what their needs are, getting in touch with who they really are as a person, and then helping them grow and experience something different. So we always need more mentors. I know each one of you in the audience finds a way to serve, whether it's in the classroom or in your community, your mosque, your temple, your church. But hopefully you can all find a child to really wrap your arms around. And if you already have a child that you're working with, find another if you have the capacity for it. We need more and more loving mentors in our community, seriously.
I think one thing that we've all known, if you've been working in the schools, the lack of importance mental health is getting in the services that we're providing. A recent study by the health department, Dr. Kane, found that the highest need amongst all age levels in our community are mental health needs. So it starts young and then it goes into seniors. And I think in our community, if we are more proactive about the power of mental health and understanding what positive mental health is, that we will be able to impact the ACEs. And another part, is just to say, is early intervention. You know, five-year-old little boys and 6-year-old little boys and girls who are fighters and aggressive at age 5 and 6, if we don't directly intervene, they're going to be fighters at 12, at 16, and at 22. And so it's about that paying attention to what we know, because when a brain's stressed at 5, if we're not intentional, it's still stressed as the children are older. So I think early intervention was getting conversation, but I think more needs to happen.
Also, you know, more activities that at school, the school as a center of the community, rather than focusing purely on academics and test scores. When I was a kid, we were at school a lot. You know, I didn't get home till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. You know, we had study circles. We had, you know, the gym was open. And I think back to some of the role models. You know, we talk about mentors. You know, there's a dearth of role models in certain communities. You know, we work with these kids all day, and then we send them back to what? Or to God knows what. You know, and then we have to deprogram them every time they come back in the next day. And so, you know, if we could have more activities in the school, you know, that camping trip, that was just awesome, you know. And sadly, it was only once a year. But anything to build the students as a community so they're not fighting each other because you live on 16th Street and I live on 30th Street, you know, having those types of activities at the school, making the school more community friendly, I think would be beneficial to us as a community as a whole.
Any closing remarks from anybody?
I always something to say. I think the important part about the study is it makes it real. And I think it adds power to our work. And it's important to remember that there were some of those days that are tough, and we just finished ISEP testing, so anybody have anyone cry that you were testing? I happened to be in classroom this week and did see that. And it kind of made me stop and think again, the pain that this little girl was feeling and this hurt. Did we understand what was behind it? And did we take time to find out why on Friday her hair was all great, nice and shaped, but on Monday she came and she was disorganized, and I forgot to ask her about her weekend. And I was thinking, oh my, that was probably an error. I did the encouragement, but I didn't ask a question about her hair, but I didn't know her very well. So I thought, So I think it's every time that your heart says, I wonder why, ask, because maybe it is something that you can fix if you understand it or have impact upon. So I just encourage you to follow your hearts with your good practice that you're learning.
Share this film with others, you know, and keep the conversation going.
And actually, that's a great leadway to what's next, because I think you brought up research, Cindy. And so as a follow-up to this, all of you will get an email from Rachel and our friends at WFYI, and it'll include some actual research. They referred to it in the film, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study and the research connected to that. So you will get that in an email, and we want you to share that. And then also, we're going to continue the conversation. I'm very interested in what can we do. There's a lot of educators in our city that they are playing this role every day. And what can we do to provide support to them and to make sure that we're doing everything we can to address this. So the conversation's going to continue on May 12th. So the idea tonight was really to raise awareness, watch the film, and then start to take action. So you will receive an email from us. And there was a flyer out on the table. It looks something similar to this. And, you know, of course, we want you to, you know, use your social media accounts to share the word about this. And we also, you know, just from an action standpoint, you know, what happens if everybody in this auditorium, you know, took that email, invited 2 friends to the next session, and then we continued to have this conversation? And of course, don't forget to turn your note cards, because we want your questions in the audience. Again, short of us being here much later than we would want to be, we want to now take this to the next level. And outside of these community experts, start to hear your voices and what questions you have, so that can frame the next discussion. And I'm just going to check with Rachel. Did I forget anything? Are we good? All right, that's it. Yes, thank you so much for coming. Be sure to put your note cards in the basket as you head out. And I think, Gail, you might have a couple closing comments.
Do. Thank you, Carlotta. I want to say thank you to everyone who's here tonight. You care so much about children and you work so hard every day. And at WFYI, we just want to say we applaud that work and we want to do what we can to support it. Carlotta, thanks for hosting a stimulating conversation. Ahmed, Miriam, Clete, Cindy, always a pleasure to work with all of you, and thank you for sharing your insights. Carlotta has given you some next steps. I want to add one more date to your list of things to think about. Our friends from Chalkbeat are in the room with us tonight, and I want to point out that 2 days before you come to WFYI to talk more about ACEs, we'll be having our 30th conversation about education here, and we're going to talk about what comes after I-STEP. We have a pretty amazing group of people who are ready to talk with you about that, so I hope that you'll consider that. So as you leave tonight, Carlotta's given you your final tasks. We want to thank you. We want to wish you a great day tomorrow in school, and just appreciate what you do. Thanks.